What a downer. Right? We had good energy. We were magnifying the Lord. And then we come to this really harsh parable with an ending that kind of makes us uncomfortable. Kind of takes away from our spirit of celebration that we started in, right? Let's hold that thought. Can you go back with me last week if you were here? Last week, when we started our service at 10:30 and we began with our procession, do you know how pumped up I was? I was so excited to be walking through a procession down our church aisle towards our altar. I could have run through a wall at that moment. And in fact, if you go back and watch the video I watched, and I laughed at myself because I'm just doing this. I'm so ready. And it was like coming out of the tunnel, like at a Penn State game or something. It's really how I felt. It was the closest I'll ever feel to running out of a tunnel at Penn State, right? There was energy, there was excitement. I was feeling it. Were you feeling it? Is it so bad to be so excited at church? So full of happiness? So joyful? So full of the spirit of celebration? Is it so wrong to celebrate at church? It's not wrong. It's not wrong, of course. But then, it isn't easy. It isn't easy to celebrate at church. Why is that? What keeps us from entering into a spirit of celebration here in this sanctuary? Let me offer 5 common reasons, or if you will, excuses, that sometimes we might find ourselves saying for why we don't engage ourselves in celebration here in the Lord's house. 5. Maybe the first one is, well, it's kind of undignified, isn't it? To celebrate, to kind of let loose a little bit, to sing a little louder, to kind of, I'm feeling my hand coming up. Wait, come back down. Come on back down. I'm in church now. I don't want to be moving too much. There's something about celebration that sometimes we think that to celebrate is beneath us. It's beneath us. We got a reputation, right? We don't want people seeing us acting a little funky, undignified. Another one is, well, maybe it's irreverent to celebrate, to enter into a spirit of happiness and joy and merrymaking here in church. Maybe it's irreverent. Maybe it doesn't really please God to raise our voices, to make noise. Maybe to celebrate is beneath God. There's a third reason. Maybe we're afraid to celebrate because we're afraid of being manipulated. You ever been to a church where there's a spirit in the air and there's excitement, right? And you can kind of get caught up in it. And you can find this really anywhere. If you go out to a concert, to a game, there's an energy in the room, and all of a sudden you can find yourself just get swept right up into the energy of the room. And all of a sudden you're cheering, you're dancing, you're raising your hands, and you really don't know why. You're just kind of caught up in the spirit, right? And you look back on it and you're like, what was I doing? And you kind of feel like you weren't yourself. Maybe you were manipulated. This is a real fear, friends. I'll tell you something from my past. For a long time, I was a part of a church where I found myself, my emotions being manipulated. And then I was asked to maybe celebrate at times when it wasn't appropriate. Or it was celebrating just for my own sake and not celebrating for maybe God's sake. There's a fear of manipulation. And then there's just the tried and true, the classic, it's just not my style to celebrate. It's not our tradition. I'm an introvert, please. Leave that for somebody else. There are churches down the road that can do all the hollering and praising. That's not our church. That's not our way. It's not who we are. Celebration, yeah, somebody else can do it. If you want to go there, go there. Not here. It's not us. It's not me. And this fifth one more for you. This one's a little scary. What if you don't have a reason to celebrate? What if you don't have a reason to be joyful? What if you can't find it within yourself to celebrate? Let's come back to that. This morning, Chad read verses from the book of Exodus. And these particular verses, they are from a very, very old tradition. In fact, there are biblical scholars who feel like these verses right here contain a bit of poetry that are amongst the oldest in all of the Bible. They come from the early tradition of God's people worshiping together, celebrating, singing praise, rejoicing in what God had done for them. That in Exodus, this contains this very early instance of not Christian if you will, but really the worship of God that we as Christians have inherited. And led by Miriam. And Mim, in honor of you. It's close to home, right? Led by Miriam. And Miriam kind of starts the tradition of praising and singing that's then captured throughout all the Bible. It goes through the Psalms, right? Where we're rejoicing and we're praising. We go all the way to Jesus, who loves to sit down and have a feast. He loves to celebrate. He loves to drink and he loves to eat. And then it gets captured in the book of Revelation, where we can imagine what it might be like when God finally, his kingdom comes and we are rejoicing and we're praising with all we have and we're celebrating. There is this image. It's foundational. It's central to what we do, that we as people of God are meant to gather and to celebrate the good things that God has done. His saving works. God's salvation. That what we're doing here on Sunday morning is principally to celebrate. That's foundational. And it's captured in our tradition from the earliest times until now. Now, let's go back to that uncomfortable story about the servant. The slave is the translation I read, but I'm going to say servant. The servant, the unforgiving servant. There's a danger if we don't engage in a discipline of celebration. There's a danger if we don't bring celebration into the heart of what we do in worship. This servant, he's forgiven of a great sum. It's supposed to represent the way in which God has done something for us, right? God has forgiven us. So God has forgiven us, therefore we need to forgive others. And what the servant doesn't do is the servant doesn't give the mercy that the servant has been shown. He's given great mercy and he doesn't extend the great mercy. The servant doesn't have the proper response to the good gift that has been shown him. The servant has been forgiven, and does he celebrate it? Does he rejoice in it? No. No. The servant doesn't celebrate mercy, forgiveness. The servant then becomes hardened, and he takes his forgiveness as an opportunity to oppress and persecute another. Friends, there's a danger if we can't engage in celebration, if we can't rejoice in what God has done for us. Sometimes, if we don't celebrate that, what that can do is it can kind of close us off. It can make us look inward. We can start to feel self-righteous. We can have an inflated sense of self-worth. We can become hard. And next thing you know, you really can't forgive somebody. You really can't love somebody because you don't have that joyful spirit, that celebratory spirit about you. There's a reason to celebrate. And the reason, of course, is to give thanks for what God has done for us. Yes, of course. But there's another reason to celebrate too. And that reason, friends, is to cultivate an environment, a disposition within yourself so that you can have that sort of joy in which forgiveness easily comes out of you. The way that love can easily flow out of you. See, celebration, the act of praising, the act of rejoicing, clap your hands, making noise, it has a way of breaking something within you. That hardness that you have, you can let it go. You ever notice, this is something when I was thinking about this sermon, I was thinking about all the conflicts I had when I was growing up amongst my friends. And whenever one of us would feel wronged, one of the best ways for us to extend forgiveness to another was to engage in some sort of play. Was to play together. Was to have fun. Was to celebrate. Because what it could do is that celebration, it just cut right through the mood, the tension, the conflict, and it created a space in which, hey, that wasn't so bad. I can forgive you now. It happens easy when you have that joyful, celebratory spirit. There's a reason to forgive. We give thanks for what God has done in our lives. We celebrate so that we can love and show forgiveness to others. If you've got a conflict with somebody, you're struggling for forgiveness, think about what it might mean to celebrate who God is and watch what God might do to your heart. Now, can I take it up a notch? I'm not done. That was too easy. That really is too easy. You could all in this room, if I challenged you, you could find something that you could be grateful for, something to celebrate, I bet. You could probably find it. Or maybe not. What if you don't have a reason? What if you're looking back throughout your week, maybe the past month, the year, your life, and you really can't find a reason to celebrate? You really can't put something and say, well, God did this for me. That isn't part of your story. You really can't think of a time when God did something for you. God acted for you. God saved you. Maybe that's not part of your story. It's not a reason for you to celebrate. What if you've gone through just a little bit too much? What if you've suffered? What if your life has been too hard that you just can't possibly enter into a framework of celebration? You can't possibly celebrate. You're blinded to it. You're cut off. What if you don't have a reason to celebrate? You can't just manufacture a spirit of celebration, can you? Can you just, through your own will, just celebrate and rejoice? Is that possible? Is celebration, in fact, a discipline or a practice that you can do? Not in response, but something that you can engage in prior to? Is that possible? The Christian worship tradition says yes. The Christian worship tradition that we find in our New Testament says that we do not, in fact, have to wait for God to do anything for us before we can celebrate. That we don't have to look for our past. In fact, the Christian worship tradition says that we can look to God's future, to what God has promised us, and there find a reason to celebrate. The early Christians knew that God, they had a belief. They knew that God was coming. That's what Jesus promised. They knew that justice, that love, that peace was coming. And that promise was enough for them to celebrate and rejoice and sing. It hadn't happened yet, friends. There's nothing God had done for them. But just the promise, just the hope, was reason enough to celebrate. You celebrate what is expected, what is promised. You let celebration come prior to. It's the path you walk. It's not something you do in response to what God has done. It's something that you can do to welcome God's coming. That's the Christian tradition of celebration. Now, wait. Will, are you inviting us to kind of fake it here? The fake it till you make it kind of thing? We know this expression? Like if I don't feel like celebrating, you're just asking me just to kind of, all right, I'm going to celebrate now. I don't feel like it, but I'm going to fake it. I'm not asking you to do that at all. I'm not asking you to fake anything at all. I'm simply inviting you to enter into, to experience the oldest truth, the most fundamental truth of our being. That when we celebrate, you can experience who God is, God's love, that God is love. And through celebration, whether or not you're feeling or not, that your celebration can be a way of knowing who God is. Not of celebrating what God has done, but knowing who God is. That through celebration can be a tool that you can practice to know God, to face whatever it is you're experiencing, to endure it, to be joyful, experience God's hope, and also experience God's salvation. What would it look like for our church to celebrate? How can we foster the practice of celebration? Through singing, banging drums, celebrating, dancing? My son and I, for those of you who don't know, I was a stay-at-home father before I came to the Abbey. And if you've done any parenting at all, you know that you're going to have conflicts with your children. That's going to happen. Starting from the beginning, conflicts are going to come. And I remember one particular day, Aeneas and I, we were at odds. Just at odds. I wasn't doing what he wanted me to do. He wasn't doing what I wanted him to do. And it was just clash, conflict. But you know what I decided to do? To kind of break through that spirit of conflict, I decided that we needed to dance. And so I put on some music, and all of a sudden Aeneas and I had a dance party right there in our living room. And all of a sudden, we celebrated together, and we knew each other at that moment. We knew the love that we had for each other. We could celebrate, and all of a sudden there's peace, there's joy, there's resolution. May the church be a place where folks can come and celebrate and know God's love. Amen.